All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of SuperFreq. I'm your host, Talia. How are we all feeling and doing out there? So I want to jump right in to this week's episode on the physics and theology of prayer. I'm also going to touch on the neuroscience and a bit of the psychology because all of it organizes the way that we experience ourselves and human behavior in general. But additionally, it's become such a massive part of my daily kind of devotional practice to God. And whether or not you call that source or unity, it's essentially all saying the same thing through a different layer of what we feel to be safe or what we feel to be a threat. Some people have a tremendous amount of rejection to what the church has done to itself through indoctrination. I was one of those people, and I still have ish because I do not believe that you need an arbiter or a gatekeeper between you and a relationship with God, and certainly between you and a relationship with Christ. I say all of that because there's so much good neuroscience coming out around the fundamental rewiring and neurological change of what prayer can do that I want to jump into that now. So as always, I want to start with a question, and I want to utilize these podcasts and meditations as a way to help you reorganize yourselves and stay a bit more centered with whatever you're doing in your day-to-day. All right, so let's take a deep breath, you guys, and let's jump in. So the question that I asked in the beginning of this research was, and still is, as an ongoing working kind of theory, is what does prayer actually solve, and what is organizing itself through prayer? Essentially, what does prayer actually do? So kind of put a pin in those, and let's get into it. First, I want to talk about the quantum technology that is prayer, but we kind of asked the wrong question as quantum scientists. You know, people have tried to use quantum physics to prove prayer works through the observer effect, entanglement, consciousness collapsing reality. Most of those arguments stretch the science far beyond what it actually says, which is where I think we've gotten ourselves into trouble with trying to show that it actually has sustainable value and can be proven through physics principle. It was never supposed to compete with physics, and this is where science gets really, really problematic. They're answering different questions, okay? They're answering completely different questions. Physics asks, how does the universe behave, and how does that behavior interact with one another? Theology asks, why does it exist, and who created it, and what is our relationship with our creator? Neuroscience asks, what is the mechanism? And psychology seeks to understand itself through the emotions. How does that make me feel? And then the biology of it is, how is my physical body responding to all of these things? These are multiple streams of information that are creating an overarching system. So when I look at systems theory, what prayer is attempting to solve in terms of X is an incoherence problem. We are out of alignment. We are disconnected from ourselves, and we're seeking let's say a mechanism or a process, or you call it a ritual, call it whatever you want. Okay, we're seeking to solve for X in this case, which is I need to feel more grounded, more connected to myself, or I feel uncertain, I feel afraid. And so we're utilizing prayer to create more internal coherence through resonance and synchronization. These are all quantum computational processes. This is all systems. And in systems theory and systems thinking, we're looking to constantly create unification. We want to unify into singularity, because otherwise we're going to stay inside of the alignment problem, which is all of these silos and multiple systems and ecosystems operating within themselves without having one cohesive architecture. The moment we unify all of this stuff, we'll move into a completely different blockchain of logic, which I'll talk about on another podcast. But physics actually tells us something really fascinating, which is reality isn't simply a collection of independent objects. It's like physics, nothing in physics operates independently, okay? It's not a collection of independent objects like bumping into one another. It's interactive. Everything exists within relationship, okay? Gravity, electromagnetism, fields, matter interacts with matter, energy is exchanged, information propagates, it moves through different waveforms of information. Nothing exists completely isolated. Then systems theory takes that even further, which is the world that I live in now, is like, what's the meta theme? Okay, it shows us something really, really fantastic, which the behavior of any system doesn't come from the parts alone. It emerges from the relationships between the parts. So change the relationship, and then the whole system reorganizes. That's where prayer gets really interesting. So it's not merely speaking words into the air, it's entering into a dynamic relationship with God, creator, unity, whatever you want to call that. Not a relationship with an idea, a relationship with an organizing system, okay, like a meta-organizing system. So what happens when a human, when we repeatedly enter into relationships with this creator source energy of everything? It's a theological question, but it's also a systems question, because every relationship is changing us, whether or not we think it is or not. Our relationship with social media, our relationship with our parents, our relationship with our spouse or partner, our relationship with our pets, siblings, work, purpose, motivations, etc. I mean, I can go on and on. Parents shape children, friends, community, culture shape identity, marriage changes our behavior, communities shape our values, culture shapes perception, relationships are organizing forces. So why would our relationship with God be one exception? Now I want to talk about the neuroscience behind all of this. So when you sit down and actually intend to just sit in meditation, you connect to God, you connect to source, I want you to ask yourself what you are connecting to and how that connection is making you feel. Do you feel more centered? Do you feel less anxious? Do you feel more grounded? And I taught like connecting to the highest self for a long time. And that's fantastic if it, provided that it still works for you and you're in a great feedback loop with your highest and you're getting information. It's a Gnostic term. It's a New Age term, well, post-New Age term, I would say. And it was a way of organizing uncertainty and prediction. Where I ran up against my own self on all of this, and what I challenged my own logic against, was, what is that self connected to? And are we still looping with self, which is upholding the very mental, like the very pattern we're trying to dismantle, or the mental threshold we're trying to disseminate? Are we working against ourselves by looping and staying looped with ourself? That was the question that I asked. And for me, I just completely re-architected and go directly to God now through the fifth, through Christ consciousness, through Jesus, and I just stay there. And whenever I need guidance on all of that, I connect to the feeling, to the embodied feeling of what Christ consciousness is. And it just resolves a lot of uncertainty for me. And it does for me what I can't quite do for myself in the moment. And now I just fiercely listen to that intelligence a lot more than I did before. But when you focus your attention on prayer or meditation or sitting still, the brain fires on, okay, in different ways, regardless, depending on what the prayer is. Let's say it's the Lord's Prayer. So, or a creator prayer. Take the Lord's Prayer, take words out that you don't feel good about and put in words that feel better to you. Dear Creator, dear pure source energy, guide my thoughts, my wills, and my action today. Guide my nervous system, guide my body, restore my sanity. Like, lift this anxiety from my chest. Help me get more clarity and understand myself better. Why didn't this relationship work out? Guide the next indicated action. Help me get me out of my own way. Script a little bit like you're having a conversation. When you do that, the prefrontal cortex, which governs logic and empathy and decision making, and self-control immediately reorients towards attention. Okay, attention is up for grabs, and it is a massive biological organizing principle to how our bodies operate, and then it works in conjunction with all the other centers in your brain. The next section that comes online is the amygdala, which governs our fear. It's the fear center of our brain. And when you set the attention to seek something greater than you that is all-knowing, let's say, let's use an if, okay? If the creator energy of the world, if God was the permeating intelligence beneath all and just knew more and had more access and more, let's say, catalyzing power to make radical shifts in my life, what would be available to me? So less anxiety, right? Immediately, I don't have to do this on my own. I'm totally held. I feel safe. The fear starts to slowly down regulate. Okay, we start to move more into more coherence. So that's the amygdala. Then you have the default mode network, which governs reflection and memory and self-awareness. So the more that you engage in this conversation and you seek to have a conversation with God, you're actually learning about yourself, because as within, so without, you're a mirror of the divine, and you get real insight of yourself. But if you're not in constant dialogue with something greater and you're not getting really, really quiet and still, like you always have to be engaged in something, you're not going to hear what you don't want to hear. That's how you know you're connected to something, is you're getting schooled a little bit by what your brain cannot predict. So it is a prediction machine, and it will just fire off different ways that it thinks you should behave based on what it knows. So through neuroplasticity, which is essentially the trails that your brain has already made in the forest, okay? And then you have synaptic connection. Those are new neural pathways being created. Both of those work in tandem. So not only are you going to start rewriting old scripts, but you're going to create new narratives through both of those mechanisms of the brain. That's what's really great about it. Then the brain has instruction based on how you pray. So through our confirmation bias mechanism of our brain, it'll start looking for that to be true. And then you kind of are going to observe that information and then take the next indicated action of whatever that means for you. So the psychology of all of this is when you feel like you're in relationship with something, you simply feel less alone. This is just not only ongoing research, but like working built-in frameworks in all psychotherapy practices, is you're seeking to understand what is the motivating factor behind disruption in communication, and how can we move more into right relationship? It's essentially learning how to handle situations better. That's what psychology helps us do. What is our relationship with self? And how is that relationship changing with other people? And through all of those different organizing principles, okay, how does the relationship with God organize the person who inhabits reality? Another question to ask. We change molecularly the more we repetitively show up and do something that maybe we don't understand. Through that curiosity, the limbic part of our brain, which is the feeling brain, starts to regulate our cortisol. And biologically, we just feel more grounded. And then other chemicals come online. Serotonin, what's the other one that women run? Oxytocin, and then dopamine. So all of those different chemicals start to fire off at different ways because we don't feel alone. We feel connected to something greater than us. And then we go out with that sense of feeling, and then we see things differently. It changes the way our perception is being organized. Now, if you have a lot of fear patterns, scarcity patterns, lack patterns, and you've worked a lot on decoding and deprogramming and rewiring sacrifice patterns from religion, I really, really get this, and I know this. Like I said, I wrote an entire chapter of my book that I still stand behind. Like, even me going back and revisiting some of it, I was like, yeah, I mean, I still feel this way. And it didn't stop me from reorienting myself completely dead center to where I'm stationed now and what I believe. And I think being able, again, to challenge your own logic and see how you evolved is a sign of spiritual maturity. So the thing that got me started in really having a devotional practice daily is the question of, what do I actually have to lose? And what am I really afraid of? What am I afraid will happen if I start praying? And I just didn't have a good enough answer for that. So I started, and then my reorientation thereafter, which I've talked about in other podcasts, kind of started making a lot more sense. I just was able to get out of my own way and show up to do the next indicated action. And ultimately, I just felt softer, more feminine, and way more grounded. I actually started to inhabit Talia even more, the version of me that I saw a year ago and prior to that. And I'm like, wow, attention really does organize perception, and human experience is organized by perception. And I've been talking about where you put your attention really matters. And I just want to reduce the noise and create more peace in my life, which is why I do not manifest anymore. And I'm going to leave you with a question that came in from the Field Hub, a Field Hub member, which is, given your new orientation, how do you manifest now? And I really don't, because I'm going to tell you that manifestation is control in disguise, because you're creating conditions with how you want to create inadvertently, which are all filtered through biases. So if you have to have things that look a certain way in order to feel like you are worthy of creating a life that you want, that is control. And then you're creating conditions with how you want to experience that. And when those things don't come to pass the way the system had predicted for you, there's a collapse into disempowerment, which again upholds the very thing you're trying to dismantle. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of you not being worthy of creating the thing that you want to actually create. So now I sit in stillness, I pray, I meditate, I kind of do both and I'll just listen and wait for information to come in, and I'll get a feeling. So if my nervous system is creating a prediction of something that I wouldn't even think of, I pay attention to that, because physics-wise, wave forms of information are constantly moving through you. The frequencies and intelligences are constantly moving through you. This is how SuperFreq was created. I just caught that wave, and I'm like, I am going to come and bring that into form. Awesome, super fun, really exciting, and has lasted. It's something I haven't changed. I've evolved inside of, but the core idea stayed intact since its inception. So I get a precognitive feeling, and I get really curious about that, and I just go with what is embodied and what I want to feel. Then I will go and kind of look at images, and I'll kind of move through the layers, and I'll work through my nervous system, because somewhere in there's going to be a level, and there's going to be a number that you want, let's say you want to make, that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Where does it get sticky? Where's that edge for you, right? Like, oh, I just can't move there. I can't, do X, Y, Z. Why? Why can't you do that? And so kind of start interrogating that. So I work with feeling, I get an idea or an image, and then I literally send it right back up to God. And I'm like, I got it. This is awesome. That's a yes for me. Tell me, show me, guide me to the next indicated action that I have to take right now in order to fulfill that. And Romans talks about this, which is being a co-heir of Christ. Okay, a co-heir, a child of God, a co-heir of Christ. And I love that so much because it really solidifies co-creator energy. I am not equal to God. I am not equal to Jesus. I am in co-creation and co-relationship with the divine. And therefore I serve the divine. So I receive the signal, I acknowledge it. Okay, yes, I've received this certified letter. Ding, I sign it basically, and I send it back saying that's something I'm willing to do. And just show me and continue to regulate my nervous system around who I need to be in order to fulfill that. And then I leave it alone and I let it go. I give it no time frames. I give full permission for this to actually land and for me to create that. I have no conditions other than it serves the divine only. I have no constraints on time. And I have a boundary only in that it needs to fulfill divine intention, will, and aligned action. And what's the other one? Oh, yeah. Permissions. That was it. I have full permissions, granted. And then I get out of my own way and I get on with my life. I do not do anything else where I'm just every single day focusing on it, every single day wondering why things aren't happening. This is exactly what I saw. Why isn't it manifesting exactly like how I saw? And then you start questioning yourself and it's just a total and complete collapse. Not a good time. Don't recommend it. So that was my baby tangent on manifestation and creation. And I think that's where I want to end the cast. All right, you guys, if you have any questions, I look forward to answering those in the comments. And I will see y'all in a couple weeks where I talk about fasting and abstinence and all that good stuff. See you then.